All right, everyone. So today it's a big week. It's Parshat Vayishlach, one of my favorite parshas. It's the parsha that we read very often around the time of Yutes Kislev, the 19th of Kislev, which is going to be next week, which is the Chag HaGeula, the redemption of the Alter Rebbe, the Baal HaTanya, as well as the what's known as the Rosh Hashanah, the New Year's of Torah HaChasidus, is the teachings of Chassidus. And also today itself is an auspicious day, meaning today, as in Wednesday, Thursday, Wednesday night, Thursday. That today is Yudalit Kislev. So tonight already in Seattle, it's already 7 o'clock. It's already past the Ma'ariv time, so it's already Yudal, the 14th of Kislev, that we know is the anniversary of the Rebbe. The Rebbe and the Rebbetzin got married in Warsaw, Poland, on the 14th of Kislev. So we're celebrating the Rebbe's anniversary, and although of course it's been many years since then, and it's after Gimel Tammuz, the passing of the Rebbe, and Chav Beis Shvat, the passing of the Rebbetzin, but we still celebrate the anniversary, not just because it was a great day for the Rebbe and the Rebbetzin, but the Rebbe himself said that on his anniversary, that he said, this is the day that connects you to I and I to you. Meaning, because the Rebbe was in the level of Pshat, in the simple level, the Rebbe was the son-in-law of the Frierdiker Rebbe. So when the Rebbe became the son-in-law of the Frierdiker Rebbe, though they were mishpacha, of course, they were family, the Rebbe was a Schneerson and a direct descendant of the Tzemach Tzedek, the third Rebbe of Chabad, and the Frierdiker Rebbe was himself a great grandson of the Tzemach Tzedek, right? The Tzemach Tzedek's son was the Rebbe Marash, the fourth Rebbe Chabad, and his son was the Rebbe Rashab. So that was the grandson of Tzemach Tzedek, Rebbe Sham Dovber. The fifth Rebbe Chabad and the sixth Rebbe Chabad was the previous Lubavitcher Rebbe, and he was the father-in-law of our Rebbe. And the Rebbe's father also was a descendant of the Tzemach Tzedek from an elder son. It means a brother of the Rebbe Marash. The Rebbe Marash was the youngest of the children of the Tzemach Tzedek, and he had he had 7 sons, and the eldest son was the Rebbe's father, Baruch Shalom. And so, although the Rebbe was mishpacha and Beis Harav, but the Rebbe api pshat means we're not going to go into the yisoid and the remez and the depth of Yudal Kislev, because it's much deeper than just the technical wedding of the Rebbe. But this is what the Rebbe says tachlis. The Rebbe said this is the day that connects you to I and I to you. So it's a day of iskashrus. So Yudat Kislev is a big day. It's a day that we become connected to the Rebbe, and that's something that we build on every single day, and we draw energy from the 14th of Kislev. So the 14th of Kislev as a chassid is one of the most important days of the calendar, because it's a day of iskashrus, and the Rebbe himself said this is a day of iskashrus. Iskashrus means from the word kesher, to tie together. So we're tied together with the Rebbe on the 14th of Kislev. We know that the Rebbe's wedding was celebrated in a very aloof way. The previous Rebbe was walking around as the super host, to encouraging everyone that came as guests and giving l'chaim and welcoming everyone. And the whole schedule of the wedding was a celebration on the highest level of simcha. There was a famous story from those who described, who were at the wedding of the Rebbe, how there was what's called a Rebbe dance. A Rebbe dance means a Rebbe's dance. What's a Rebbe's dance? Is that all in those days? You have to remember this is in the 30s. So this is early 30s. So this is before the war. And this was after communism, before the war, and a lot of the Rebbes were living around. Means the Rebbes of different dynasties, of different groups, like Belz and Bavov and Ger. So there was a lot of dynasties that were wiped out during the Holocaust, and they had all kind of Rebbes that came as to celebrate with the Lubavitcher Rebbe for the wedding of his son-in-law, the future Rebbe. And so a lot of Rebbes came to this wedding. And they had a Rebbe dance, that the previous Rebbe danced with all the Rebbes. And they say that those who were there at the wedding and saw the Rebbe dance, it was a scene that would inspire anyone to see all these great tzaddikim dancing together, celebrating the wedding of the Rebbe's daughter, the previous Rebbe and the Rebbe. The great scholars and leaders of the time came to join the Rebbe and celebrate his wedding. So it was an auspicious day then, it's an auspicious day now. So l'chaim, everyone, we should draw energy as chassidim. L'chaim. To draw energy as chassidim and to focus and polish our skashrus to the Rebbe. And the Rebbe would say, means again, the word skashrus means our connection. I mean, like when you tie something together, you knot something together, so it becomes one. A kesher shel kayama, everlasting knot. And so how do we tie ourselves to the Rebbe? How do we makash ourselves to the Rebbe? Is by doing what the Rebbe asked from us to do. And the Rebbe asked from us to do for us to do the Tem Efsaim, means to find opportunities to go and meet people and do one of the Tem Efsaim or more than one of them, whether it's telling women encouraging women to light Shabbos candles, asking people to put on tefillin, the mitzvah of tzedakah, the mitzvah of mezuzah, so making sure everyone has a mezuzah, the mitzvah of avos Yisrael, etc. By small svarim, making sure there's a svarim, and then of course there's the takanas the Rebbe said about saying chitas and learning Rambam. Even if you could learn just the mitzvah of the day, say for mitzvahs, which is today in English you could find, it's a few lines of telling you about the mitzvah of the day, and then when you do that, that's a way you connect to the Rebbe. So we're learning Chassidus in general, the Rebbe's teachings. So these are all the way that we connect to the Rebbe, and this is the ways that we're going to march together as Chassidim with the Rebbe in the coming Mashiach Tzidkenu B'Meira B'Yameinu. So again, this week's Parsha is Vayishlach. Vayishlach is a very powerful Parsha. It's a pivotal Parsha in the history of the Jewish people, because Yaakov in his life has we could say 4 major times of Yaakov's life. Yaakov Avinu had the life, and he wasn't a bocher, he wasn't a young man when he came to Lavan. I think the mathematics was about 70 or so. So he wasn't such a young man when he came to Lavan, his uncle. So his first life was he lived as a bachelor, so to say, in the security and comfort of his father's home. Until he was 13 or 15, he lived with his grandfather, Avram Avinu. And we know that the fathers learned together. I mean, imagine you sit a whole day learning Torah with Yitzchak and Avram. And then he later went to the yeshiva of Shem and Aver for 14 years. So when he sat there, he lived in a life of he had no worry. His father was a super wealthy man. His grandfather was a wealthy man. People of status, people of like the Avimelech says, and Shem Malki Tzedek says, and the people of Ches, they call Avram Avinu Nasiata. You're the prince. Avram was the prince. He was like almost the king of all the people. Yaakov grew up in royalty. Avram, they looked to Avram. The people looked to Avram as their leader, as their guide, as their compass of what they should be doing. Especially after Avram beat the kings that captured his nephew. Everyone recognized the strength of Avram and the derech of Avram. And he had thousands. Him and his wife Sarah had thousands of people that they influenced under their kanfei Ashchina. So he growing up and he lived with Avram. I mean, he was 13 and 15 is not like an age that you don't remember. We talk about that together they would sit together and say the 15 Shir Hamalas is together. And then of course he grows up at Yitzchak, the great Yitzchak that we learned about. The great blessings that Yitzchak is, the power of Yitzchak. I mean, he had a brother, he had a brother Esav that, maybe they had a little bit of differences of opinion and different views of life. But typically, him and Esav got along. Esav had one brother, and that was Yaakov. And Yaakov had one brother, and that was Esav. Esav. God says, the Navi says, Esav and Yaakov are brothers. So Esav and Yaakov are brothers. They didn't maybe see eye to eye in the derech and how they should live, but it's in theory. What we know, they respected one another. Yeah, Esav respected Yaakov being a person who studied Torah. And Esav and Yaakov respected Esav. Esav had milas. Esav had hello, Dr. Susan. Esav had milas. Esav was tremendous kibbutav. Yaakov didn't have the level of respect for his father that Esav had. Esav had tremendous kibbutav. Esav also had great milas. So it was a family of unity and a family of relaxation, and he grew up in comfort. That was one stage in Yaakov's life. The next stage of Yaakov's life is when he gets the blessings from his father, and then starts the obvious tremendous friction between him and his brother Esav. And Esav and Rivka sees in prophecy that Esav says that that's it, I'm going to kill Yaakov. And it's not the first time. It wasn't an empty threat. Rivka took it very seriously. It's the first two brothers in history killed each other, literally. Cain killed Abel. It's not something that was unheard of. And they fought over less things. Cain was jealous of Abel's ability to do the right thing, to give the proper sacrifice. Here, Yaakov took the blessings that Esav really wanted. So when Rivka hears through Ruach HaKodesh, Rashi says, Rivka, it says, the Torah says that Esav was thinking about it. Right away, Rashi asks, how does Rivka know what Esav's thinking? Ruach HaKodesh, God came and told her, listen, you got to do something. Esav wants to kill Yaakov. And they take the threat very seriously, and they send him off to Lavan. And he's immediately his life changes. Esav sends his son Eliphaz, who robs Yaakov of every penny he has, his credit cards, his watch, his money, his pocket money, his anything here. He's penniless. Keep him makali over as a yard. And he crossed over towards Macedonia, towards Charon with his stick. That's it. And that we learned last week in Parshas Vayishlach, that Yaakov crosses over and he meets Lavan and he has nothing. Lavan kisses and hugs him and tries to see where's Yaakov hiding his money, right? If the Rashi says if Eliezer comes with donkeys carrying all the spoils and gold and silver and delicacies of the world, he gifts Rivka all this fancy jewelry, and he gives gifts to Lavan. Surely Yaakov must be coming. What happened to his entourage? What happened to his luggage? He comes just standing there with a stick and a bag. Yaakov tells him, we have issues with Esav. So then he goes into the second stage of his life, which that's the stage of his life of Yaakov living in the house of Lavan. And there he marries his wives and builds a family. He has 12 of his children, meaning his 11 boys and Dinah. We don't know about the other silent children that weren't mentioned, of course. The Gemara brings down that Yaakov's children were all born with twins. But the children that we know about, he has 12 children, the 11 sons, including Yosef and Dinah, that are born in Parshas Vayishlach. And the whole experience of Yaakov's life mission in Charon and Eretz in Chutz La'aretz, we learned about in last week's Parsha. This week's Parsha starts with Yaakov. That with the end of last week's Parsha says that Yaakov comes all the way to the border. It's very interesting. Tells us that the end of last week's Parsha tells us that it says that after Yaakov's final encounter with Lavan, means he works for him for 22 years and he builds a family. He works for him 14 years for his wives. And he does all the avoda of Lavan Garti. He transforms Lavan. He takes all the sparks and Lavan chases him. And all the Hasidic deep explanations of that final encounter, whether Lavan was giving him the last sparks or Lavan who represents also a high level of Loivan Elyon, the simplistic white, the pshitus of Elikus, the simplicity of godliness, the undefined levels. He empowers Yaakov with the final charge, blesses his sons and his daughters. He gives Yaakov that final energy that Yaakov has to go to the next stage in his life. Lavan says, 1 second, you left too early. You're missing. I need to give you something else. I need to give you some more energy because the next stage you need more. And it says, Vayashkem, chapter 32, Perik Lev, in Bereshis, finishes that after the encounter and they have their harsh words and Lavan is accusing Yaakov and Yaakov is accusing Lavan. They finally had a conversation, right? That they had a cryptic conversation when Yaakov says it's time to pay me. So Yaakov goes and he organizes that he should get all the striped and dot and all the nekudim, akudim, brudim, all the animals that have deficiencies. And Yaakov becomes very wealthy. We learned last week, Yaakov, we find a language that we don't even find by Yitzchak. Mamish, vayifret, ma'od ma'od, 2 times ma'od. We know that ma'od, in the Shema, we say, v'chol levavcha, v'chol nafshecha, v'chol ma'odecha, with all your might. Ma'od is the highest level. And Yaakov's 2 times ma'od. We find those. Where do we find ma'od again? We find that when the spies come back and they accuse that they say negative things about Eretz Yisrael. You say it's a land of Eretz Acheles Yoshveha. It's very similar, right? Yaakov is coming back to Eretz Yisrael. The Jews were coming back to Eretz Yisrael after being slaves, just like Yaakov was living as in Golus, in exile. By Lavan, the Jewish people were exiled in Egypt. And the Jewish people are about to go into the land. They send spies, and the spies come back and say, "No, we can't go to Eretz Yisrael. It's a land that consumes its Eretz Acheles Yoshveha. It eats its inhabitants. It swallows its inhabitants." And what does Kalev say? No, Toiva Aretz Ma'od Ma'od. The land is very, very good. So we know that the Chassidus explains that when Kalev said Toiva Aretz Ma'od Ma'od, that corresponds to the Ma'od of Yitzchak, of Yaakov's wealth, that they connect, that extra Ma'od, the extra might, that extra power that the Jewish people needed to go into Eretz Yisrael, of what you could accomplish in Eretz Yisrael. And Yaakov also got it, so he could go back to Eretz Yisrael. He's ready to go back. So, but then Lavan chases him, and then they finally have the words that they should have had a long time before. Yaakov tells Lavan, "You cheated me, and you never treated me right." And Lavan says, "You ran away from me." They finally spoke it out. They had that argument that every father-in-law and son-in-law maybe has to have some time in the relationship. So Yaakov and Lavan also had that conversation where they said what they felt, and afterwards they kind of like, when you have a conversation, everyone realizes, okay, now what? Let's eat. They make a suda, they make a meal, and they say, you don't bother me, and I don't bother you. And let's move on. And Yaakov commits to be a good husband, and Lavan says, "Take care of my grandchildren." And then they make peace now they got it off their shoulders. Now, but then it says, "Vayashkem Lavan baboker." Lavan wakes up in the morning. Starts chapter 32, Perek, and he kisses his banav u'bnaisav. He kisses his sons and his daughters. And Chassidus explains the Mittel Rebbe that we brought about last week tells us that he empowered the people that have to be a mashpia. There's two kind of types of people in general in life. There's the person who's a mashpia, a person who's a giver. Their job is to bring the flow down. And there's other people, their job is to be a makabel, a receiver. That's why Hashem created that there's a Asher and a Ani, right? That there's like the Yitzhak Shabbos. Some people have to be the givers, some have to be the receivers. And of course, we spoke about the Rabbi Marash who says, "Why do I have to be the receiver?" But that's the way Hashem created the world, mashpia makabel. So Lavan comes down and says, "But both of them are avodah. Everything's in avodas Hashem, not just the mashpia. The person has to be also a good makabel, a good person that knows how to receive." So the Lavan benches vayashkim Lavan babok v'nashek levanav v'nosav. He kisses, he empowers. Through the power of kiss, he gives energy to the mashpia, to the sons who have to be giving, to the daughters who have to be receiving. He goes back to where Lavan comes from. And then it says, V'Yaakov halach l'darka. Now Yaakov is empowered with this extra charge that he gets from Lavan. And now starts a second stage the third stage in Yaakov's life. The stage after he leaves Lavan. And it says, the final verse of last week's parsha is, Vayomer Yaakov kasher so it's called the plural, the camp. And why? Because it says before that he meets the angels of Eretz Yisrael. At the meeting point, last week's parsha, we learned that the same angels Yaakov starts off the parsha, the angels leave him from Eretz Yisrael, and he has the angels of Chutz La'aretz. They meet again. And now the angels of Chutz La'aretz, of outside of Eretz Yisrael, meet the angels of Eretz Yisrael, and now Yaakov goes to this third stage in his life, going back to Eretz Yisrael, going back to his father, and dealing with Esav. His next big challenge is to deal with Esav, and that's where we open up this week's parsha. Before we talk about the third stage, the fourth stage of Yaakov's life, actually there's 5 stages. And the fourth stage in Yaakov's life is the saga of Yosef, which if you divide it into 2, is Yaakov living the years that Yosef was taken from him when his brothers in next week's parsha sell him to Egypt. And of course, the final stage, Yaakov lives his final years in Egypt. So Yaakov had stages in his life. There were different, like Rabbi Stein Zatzev in Israel used to say that today a person has to have at least 3 careers in their life. So Yaakov had many careers. He had a career as a son. He had a career as a worker for his father-in-law. He had a career in his own enterprise. He had a career that he dealt with his issues of his children fighting. And then he had the final peaceful years of his life in Egypt, where Yosef took care of him. So in this week's parsha, we open up Yaakov now is in the new stage. He's empowered by love. And what does he do? He has to face Esau. Now in Chassidus it explains that this interaction between Yaakov and Esau is really, this starts the avoda of what we're doing in this world. The idea is to get ready for Mashiach. And Yaakov, it says, the Chassidus, the Rebbe says many times, Yaakov was ready for Mashiach when he left Lavan. And the Alter Rebbe brings down in the Torah that he wanted to see if Esav was ready as well. And he sends the angels, he sends malachim. And Rashi says he doesn't send, it's not hypothetical. Rashi says malachim mamish. He actually sends angels to check out what's happening with Esav. And they come back and say, sorry, he's not ready for Mashiach because he has 400 men that he's coming here to destroy you. He wants to fight the Jewish people. That's the battle of the Jewish people for history, of Esav. And he comes with his 400 men. And Yaakov realizes that Esav is not ready for Mashiach. He thought Yaakov's message to Esav was, in Lavan Garti, I did my job. I went to Haran. I went away from our father. And I went to live with our uncle Lavan, who cheated me, my wives, he cheated me in business. I had to go and deal all the things I had to deal with in Lavan in Lavan Garti. And like not just in Lavan Garti, but that from Lavan he was able to come the man he had to come. It means if you wanted to say, of all the experiences of Yaakov, which was the experience that Yaakov became Yaakov, was by Lavan. Means where did Yaakov become that independent person? The person that found his direction, saw his mission, was able to reinvent himself as the strong Yaakov that we know to become Yisrael, is in by Lavan, where he started with nothing. And he built a family and built a success and built his avoda. He became Lavan Garti. He took pride that he was able to keep the Torah mitzvahs even by Lavan. And now in this next interaction that he has with Esav, he has to now take what he's all the spoils that he's gathered, spiritual spoils that he's gathered, to now conquer, to go change the world. So he starts right away with the problem that faces him immediately, which is Esav. And he figured that if Esav was just ready for Mashiach, then the two of them together, the world there'd be no more obstacles. If Esav had spent the time that Yaakov spent, finding his qualities. Esav also had qualities. Esav, it says, Esav had energies that were much greater than Yaakov. He had lights, the lights of Tohu. He had the lights of chaos, but they were powerful lights. Had he found a way to tap into his own holy energy, the energy of the energy of yes, he had a big Yetzer Hara, and yes, he didn't have the discipline to sit in yeshiva. You know, Yaakov was, the Torah never said Esav was a yeshiva boy. It says Yaakov was Ish Oyel, he sat in the yeshiva. But Yosef was Ish Asada. He was a wild boy. You know, the Torah, he was never sat in yeshiva. Didn't last 5 minutes in yeshiva. He was thrown out by every school he went to. He was trouble. And, you know, he gave a headache to his mother. His mother was like, oh, Yosef, what did he do now? He killed Nimrod. He did this, he did that. He was a wild chaverman. But he had tremendous koiches. He had tremendous energy. And Yaakov says, what were you doing for the past 22 years? Why weren't you working to find, everyone has qualities. Not everyone's built the same. Yaakov has his way of doing things, and Esav has his way of doing things. Esav had an ability to also find that energy and to use it directed into ways of positive, to build a positive outcome. But when the angels say no, he's the same Esav, the same person who killed Nimrod, the same person, he's the same Esav, he hasn't changed yet. And Yaakov actually, the Alter Rebbe says that Yaakov was actually hoping that Esav together, that Esav would empower Yaakov. The Esav has such power that he would give Yaakov koiches, and Mamish together. If they teamed up together, imagine, you know, it's a power that no one could. You have the power of the yeshiva boy. You have the power of Yaakov Yoshev Oyel. You have the power of Esav, who knows how to deal with the world. But if he does it in a holy way, Mashiach would have come right away. Mashiach would have come immediately. But Esav wasn't ready. So Yaakov had to go and say, okay, I have no choice. I'm gonna have to take all the things that I have to take from Esav. He has to give me his good qualities. I'm gonna have to do it all. So it says that's why Yaakov sent very interesting gifts to Esav. It says that the gifts he gave to Esav were like sacrifices. Because when you sacrifice, the idea of a sacrifice is that you're looking to bring down Hamshacha, you're looking to bring down something from God. Yaakov was looking to get from Esav his amazing energy. But he had to, in order to do that, he sent all kind of different interesting gifts that we don't find later in the Torah. He sent non-kosher animals, donkeys and camels. Those are animals that are not kosher. You can never sacrifice them on the altar. Because the Esav was kind of this unharnessed energy. Yaakov is the world of tikkun, the world of fixing, the world of how Torah mitzvahs comes down in all the measurements. You have to, today's Tanya, the Tanya of the 14th of Kislev, is about that. When it's funny how Alter Rebbe finishes it off. It's interesting. It says that King David was punished. Why was he punished? Because he compared the Torah mitzvahs to Zmiris, to songs. Zmiris Karislu. He called the Torah mitzvahs that Zmiris Hayilichukecha. That the Torah mitzvahs was like a song to David in a positive way. It gave him like, and the Alter Rebbe says that when David was in Saras, David was also, what kind of life did David have? He was pursued by his father-in-law also. Saul tried to kill him. Everyone he had enemies. His children tried to kill him. Avshalom tried to kill him. He had his advisors tried to kill him. Achitophel. David HaMelech was surrounded with tzaras. And the Alter Rebbe says at the end of today's Tanya, Reb Shimon, that the Alter Rebbe says at the end of today's Tanya, that be'ez tzarasav, in the tzaras of David, where did he find comfort? He found comfort. Imagine when you're full of tzaras, your life is pressure from all sides. Where did David HaMelech find comfort? Be'ez tzarasav, in the times of his tsar, of his pain, was the Zmiros, was that he remembered how special Torah was. And what does it mean that Zmiros? What does it mean that Torah is like songs? That the perfection of Torah, how everything, just like a perfect song, every note has to be played exact. If you mess up, if a person has a good ear, I don't know about you, but I'm a person. I wouldn't notice. There was my father once brought a Reb Shimon, and maybe Dr. Henkin remember years and years ago. My father brought down to Seattle for a performance a person who was a pianist who was playing the piano many years ago. I must 40 years ago at least, and he performed in downtown in the place that my father used to do every year, like a concert or an event. And I remember afterwards there was one person there. And Zelig Mandel, I think his name was, and he says, I heard he messed up on one note, so he was able to hear that one note, the pianist messed up on one note. What do I know? I wouldn't know if anyone messed up on 100 notes. But David HaMelech also, he looks to God and he says the Torah mitzvahs are like a perfect song. Every note matches. It makes a perfect song. Every mitzvah is so perfect. All the measurements. That when you do a sukkah, it has to be 3 walls, and it has to be, a lulav has to be that tall, and the tzitzis has to be this. David looked at the Torah mitzvahs and saw the perfection of every single detail. That one small detail can make a korban kosher or make the korban unkosher. You do something, one thing wrong, and the whole song is not there. And God says, Zmiris karis lehu. David HaMelech, imagine, he finds comfort. That in his tzaras, to find that where does he get comfort from? Not from a warm bed, or not from David HaMelech didn't sleep, we know. He slept 2 or 3 hours a night. Not from a warm bed, and not from a good meal, or l'chaim. The Alter Rebbe says, Be'ez sarasav, he took comfort in knowing the perfect Torah mitzvahs. And Hashem said still that Torah is greater than the details. But the idea of the details, that's the world of Yaakov, tikkun. That everything that the Torah mitzvahs is that through doing a mitzvah exactly as Hashem says, that's how you bring the light down. But there is an energy beyond that, the energy of Esav. Esav is not that kind of energy. He's chaotic. It's big lights. It doesn't have these small vessels. And imagine Esav would have taken that energy with Yaakov, and they would have walked hand to hand when they met. And they said, we're bringing Mashiach. No more, we're done. Ad Masa. It's time for Mashiach to come. Our father Yitzchak, that's it. We would have had Mashiach a long time ago. Then what happens after they meet? Yaakov tells Esav, we will meet again. We will meet again in the days of Mashiach, when I'm going to now have to spend, now it turns out to be 3,000 plus years, that Yaakov and his descendants have to go out there with borrowing the energy of Esav, which is the idea of to get out of our space. Of course, Torah mitzvahs has to be exact, but we have to bring the ma'od. If we want to bring Mashiach, we can't do it just with Yaakov energy. Like the Rebbe would say, it has to be oros de toyu b'kelim de tikkun. We have to take the tremendous light of Esav and fit them into the vessels of tikkun of Yaakov. And it means you're running, you have an energy. You're so charged, like the Rebbe says, that the energy of Yaakov was when you have the Pada B'Shalom Nafshi. And the Alter Rebbe sang the song of Pada B'Shalom, and the Mittler Rebbe sang the song of Pada B'Shalom, which is chapter 55 of Tehillim, which is the day where David says, my redemption was done B'Shalom in a peaceful way. That the idea is that we bring down into the world Shalom, peace, in a way that there's a Padiyah, not just peace that is just that people don't fight, but the Padiyah means that the world changes. The world will be redeemed. The Satan, the powers of evil that took a grasp on the world by eating of the tree of knowledge and the other sins throughout history, that no longer, the Bala Mavis Netzach, the world is no longer going to be a world of impurity. The world, the clutches of Tumah are no longer going to hold on to Hashem's creation. Everyone is going to be marching together to the tune of a single God. And that's going to happen. That's what Yaakov says to Esav. Esav, I see you're not ready, and maybe you're not able. But we will meet again. We're going to meet again because the world is going to be a changed world. Give me a little time. What does Yaakov tell Esav? Esav says, come with me. Yaakov says, give me some time. The kids are weak, the sheep are weak. I have still some work to do. I'll do that. Yaakov's a good brother. I'll take care of things. Esav doesn't get it. He still fights, and his descendants still fight, and we're fighting the guy. But the world doesn't know. It says in the Medrash says, if the world knew what the Beis Hamikdash was doing for the world, not only would the Goyim not have destroyed the Beis Hamikdash, they would have surrounded the Beis Hamikdash with armies to protect it. They just don't know. They don't know. They think they think this, they think that, this narrative, that narrative. If they just knew that how much the Beis Hamikdash did for them, they would not only wouldn't they destroy the Beis Hamikdash, they would guard the Beis Hamikdash. So this is this week's Parsha. We have other stories in the Parsha. We have the story of Dinah, and we have the story of the death of Yitzchak and Yaakov and Esav bury him. But this week's Parsha is the story of the Va'alam Hashim Bahar Tzion, that we're getting ready for the Pada B'Shalom Nafshi. That the Alter Rebbe's Yutas Kislev said, that's it, Chevra, we're going to make this happen. That was started with Yaakov Avinu in the encounter with Esav, and in getting ready, the Pachim Katan and the final little vessels. We're almost there. And we're going to do it in a way, like the Rebbe says, it's going to be Pada B'Shalom in a way of peace, that there's going to be a redemption, that we're going to get rid of all with the energy of Esav, with the Oris to tell you, the lights of Toh in the vessels of Tikkun, in the capacity of Yaakov, in his organization, in his knowing how to use the energies of Esav better than Esav knows how to use them. We're going to bring them Mashiach Tzidkenu. We're going to march together. Like I said, today is Yudal Kislev, the holiday, the Rebbe's anniversary. That the Rebbe says is a day of Iskashrus. And the Rebbe's mission, if anyone wanted to say what's the Rebbe's mission was, that we have to bring Mashiach. So, l'chaim everyone, this week's Parsha, we should be Zoicha, Mamish, the Pada B'Shalom Nafshi, and we should be able to sing together and dance together here in Yerushalayim Yer Kodesh. The Ani Ve'eftach Bach, the song of Yutas Kislev, the song of Pada B'Shalom Nafshi, with Mashiach Tzidkenu, l'chaim, l'chaim. Matthew said he's not here today. He's working, but I'm assuming there's going to be services in the University District Minyan. Anyone know?
Yes.
Is there a Kiddush this week?
Of course.
Of course, so there's a Kiddush. Please come and join. And if there's a Fabrengen for Yitas Kislev, I'm sure it's going to go out on the shul on the community chat. Laila Tov, everyone. Good Shabbos. Take care.